My name is Anna, and for 22 years, I poured my heart and soul into working at Meridian Freight, a mid-size logistics company just outside Columbus, Ohio. When I first started, things were so different: paper invoices stacked high on desks, fax machines buzzing away, and a tiny office filled with just a dozen people. The fluorescent lights flickered endlessly. The coffee machine was barely holding on. But we had something real. A shared belief in what we were building. I was the finance coordinator. The one who kept the books in check, made sure vendors got paid on time, and that cash flow stayed steady. No fancy title, no corner office, just hard work and loyalty. I lived through 3 office moves, 4 different CEOs, and layoffs that made the walls feel like they were closing in. Yet, I stayed. Why? Because I believed in the people and the mission. I believed that experience mattered, that dedication counted for something. Then Benjamin arrived, the new VP of Operations. All polished suits and buzzwords, fresh from a fancy consulting firm in Chicago. To him, our company wasn't a family or a legacy, it was a chessboard. And like any game, pieces had to be sacrificed to win. Experience? That was just expense in his eyes. He didn't want to understand how we worked. He wanted to reinvent everything, and fast. That's when things began to change. Benjamin didn't come for me right away. Instead, he smiled in meetings, called me institutional wisdom, and asked me to mentor Chloe, a young, eager intern fresh out of college. She was bright, full of energy, and honestly, reminded me of myself when I was starting out. I had no idea that she would soon be walking in my footsteps, replacing me entirely. But that was just the beginning of a story that would test everything I believed about loyalty, respect, and the true value of experience. When Benjamin first walked through the doors of Meridian Freight, everything shifted. I could feel it in the way meetings changed, the tone, the decisions, the subtle but unmistakable energy that whispered, "Old ways are over." At first, it was almost polite. He'd smile and nod when I spoke, calling me institutional wisdom, like it was a badge of honor. He asked me to mentor Chloe, a bright-eyed 23-year-old intern fresh out of college, eager to soak up everything I could teach her. I welcomed Chloe with open arms. She was sweet and curious, hungry to learn, and reminded me of the young woman I once was. I showed her every detail, from balancing complex spreadsheets to negotiating vendor contracts. I gave her shortcuts and hacks that only come from decades of hands-on experience. I thought I was investing in the company's future, not realizing I was training my own replacement. Then, the changes started. First, I noticed I was no longer being copied on important emails. Meetings I once led or attended were no longer on my calendar. Chloe began sitting in on client calls, sometimes in my place. I brushed it off as mentorship. After all, she needed to grow, and I wanted her to succeed. But deep down, I felt a pit forming in my stomach. The Friday morning I'll never forget arrived like any other. But the moment Benjamin called me into his office, I knew it wasn't going to be a normal conversation. He greeted me with that polished corporate smile, warm, practiced, and utterly cold beneath the surface. "Anna," he said smoothly, "we're moving in a new direction. Your role has been made redundant. This is a structural change and not a reflection on your performance." I sat there, stunned. 22 years of loyalty, experience, and hard work dismissed with a single sentence. No warning, no discussion, no gratitude. They offered me a severance package and an HR packet, then quietly escorted me out. Chloe moved into my desk the following Monday, never once meeting my eyes. That moment shattered me. I wasn't just losing a job, I was being erased. It was as if everything I'd built and contributed didn't matter. The company I loved treated me like a disposable file, discarded without a second thought. The betrayal stung deeply. In the weeks that followed, I was numb. I woke every morning at 6 a.m. out of habit, only to realize I had nowhere to go. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I missed the hum of the office printer, the clatter of keyboards, even the squeak of the conference room chair. But what I missed most was purpose, my reason to get up and fight each day. I tried to believe Chloe was unaware of the truth, that maybe she hadn't chosen to replace me. But when I checked her LinkedIn profile, my heart sank. Finance associate. It read boldly, with a smiling photo of her standing confidently in front of the very whiteboard I used to scribble on during team meetings. The company's caption celebrated fresh ideas and innovation over tradition. It felt like a slap in the face. And then the whispers started. Late one night, Melissa from accounting texted me, "You okay? It's chaos here." Chloe's in over her head. Benjamin's losing patience but pretending all is well. My stomach churned. The spreadsheet I had painstakingly refined to save the company from near financial disaster was now being repackaged as Benjamin's idea. Presented clumsily by Chloe to frustrated clients. Another message came from a long-term vendor. "Did you leave? We haven't heard from anyone about the new invoice system. Who do we contact now?" The cracks were beginning to show, and I realized Benjamin's cost-cutting gamble was backfiring. Chloe was drowning in responsibilities she wasn't trained for, and Benjamin was too arrogant to admit the company was slipping. Anger simmered beneath my numbness, a slow-burning fire that sharpened my focus. They had underestimated me badly. I knew the rhythms of the business, the cash flow cycles, client behaviors, vendor relationships. Benjamin saw only numbers. I saw people and patterns. And those blind spots were going to cost him dearly. Without shouting or confrontation, I started making quiet phone calls, friendly check-ins with clients, vendors, and a retired board member named Carl who still held influence. I didn't ask for anything, just reminded them I was still here, sharp, reliable, and trustworthy. The ripples began. My company email was deactivated, my badge useless, and even former colleagues hesitated to reach out. It was like I'd vanished. But trust, once earned, doesn't disappear so easily. Clients and vendors kept reaching out to me in frustration. Mistakes on reconciliations, missed deadlines, confusing invoices. The chaos was palpable. Jenna, from payroll, messaged me late one night. "I miss you. Anna, things are falling apart. Chloe's overwhelmed. And Benjamin doesn't care." That message hit me like a punch. I didn't hate Chloe. I knew she was a pawn caught in a game much bigger than her. But Benjamin had dismantled something that worked, replacing it with smoke and mirrors for a few dollars saved. I began documenting everything, the errors, the vendor complaints, the missed deadlines. I wasn't ready to fight yet, but I knew the storm was brewing. Then, unexpectedly, Carl called me, a calm, authoritative voice on the other end of the line. "Anna, I've heard troubling things. Is it true Benjamin replaced you with an intern?" I told him the truth, without bitterness, just facts. He was silent for a moment before saying, "That's outrageous." He promised to make inquiries. For the first time in months, hope flickered inside me. Soon after, a top client called, frustrated by financial mismanagement and confused invoicing. "Are you consulting on the side now?" he asked. I laughed softly. Just months ago, they'd cast me aside. Now, I was the one they sought out for answers. What followed was a slow but steady rebuilding of my reputation. Calls turned into meetings, meetings into contracts. I was back, not as an employee, but as a trusted advisor on my own terms. The betrayal still stung, but clarity replaced confusion. Benjamin hadn't made a strategic decision. He'd made an ego-driven mistake. Chloe reached out eventually, exhausted and overwhelmed. She confessed Benjamin had misled her, told her I'd stepped down voluntarily. She was drowning, and Benjamin's arrogance blinded him to the damage he was causing. One conversation changed everything. Chloe revealed Benjamin had misused a forecasting model I created to inflate numbers in board reports. The foundation of his leadership was built on falsehoods. The storm wasn't coming anymore, it was here. Within weeks, Benjamin was called into a closed-door meeting with the board. Rumors spread fast, and then came the email I never thought I'd see, an invitation to consult for Meridian Freight. They needed me to fix what he'd broken. Walking back into the office felt surreal. Familiar faces greeted me with relief and hope. I wasn't there for revenge, I was there to restore order, rebuild trust, and prove that experience and loyalty can never be truly replaced. Just when I thought the storm had begun to settle, the real chaos hit. Benjamin's mistakes weren't just small cracks, they were seismic. The day after my official return as a consultant, I got a flood of messages and calls from vendors, clients, and even some of my former coworkers. The company's financial foundation was crumbling faster than anyone had imagined. One evening, Jenna from payroll called me with a voice trembling between frustration and exhaustion. "Anna, it's worse than we thought. Benjamin's been fabricating reports, using outdated and misleading data to hide losses. Chloe's been caught in the crossfire. She's scared and burnt out." I took a deep breath. The web of deceit was tangled deeper than I had anticipated. I began digging through the raw financial data, which Benjamin had tried to gloss over with polished presentations and inflated numbers. The forecasting model I'd created was being misused badly. Without the detailed vendor schedules and seasonal adjustments, it painted a false picture of stability. What Benjamin did was more than reckless, it was dangerous. Meanwhile, Chloe reached out again, this time more desperate. She confessed that Benjamin had been micromanaging her, blaming her publicly for mistakes he himself caused, and yet shielding her from the board to keep up appearances. She felt trapped, used as a scapegoat. My heart ached. This wasn't just about me or the company anymore. It was about people being crushed under the weight of arrogance and greed. As I pieced together the extent of the damage, I realized Benjamin's actions could bring the entire company to its knees. I reached out to Carl, the retired board member, and laid out everything: the manipulated data, the ignored vendor issues, the faltering client trust. Carl listened intently, his usually calm voice laced with concern. "This changes everything," he said quietly. Days later, the board called an emergency meeting. Benjamin was summoned. Rumors flew like wildfire. Whispers of investigations, possible legal actions, and leadership shake-ups filled the halls. The company was at a crossroads. One morning, Chloe sent me a message I'll never forget. "Anna, I just left the meeting. Benjamin was suspended pending a full audit. It's finally happening." Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by the knowledge of how much work lay ahead. The audit uncovered even more than we expected: missing documents, inconsistent records, and evidence of financial misrepresentation. The board acted swiftly. Benjamin was officially terminated. No farewell party, no thank you speech, just an abrupt end to his reign. Chloe resigned shortly after, exhausted but determined to rebuild her career honestly. We had a heartfelt conversation where she thanked me for standing by her and promised to learn from the experience. It was a moment of closure, not just for her, but for me too. My role as a consultant became pivotal. I worked tirelessly to restore systems, rebuild vendor trust, and train the team. No more interns thrown into the deep end, just capable professionals ready to uphold the company's legacy. As the months passed, the company began to stabilize. Clients noticed the change. Vendors started returning calls. The morale slowly lifted from the ashes of chaos. And through it all, I found a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just fixing books. I was helping heal a fractured family. Yet, the experience left its mark. I knew the corporate world could be ruthless. But I also saw how resilience, integrity, and genuine care could turn tides. Benjamin's downfall was a harsh lesson, but it was also a testament to the power of experience. Today, as I run my own consulting firm, I carry those lessons with me. I remind clients that loyalty and expertise aren't costs to cut, they're investments in survival. And for anyone who's ever been overlooked, dismissed, or replaced, I say this: your story isn't over until you decide it is. Because sometimes, the quietest voices are the ones that echo the longest. After Benjamin's suspension and Chloe's resignation, the company was finally beginning to breathe again. But I realized the real work was just starting. What had happened wasn't just about bad leadership or poor decisions. It was about a fundamental misunderstanding of what truly holds a company together. For years, I had believed that loyalty and hard work were the foundation of any career. I thought that dedication, experience, and consistency would earn respect and security. But Benjamin's actions shattered that belief. He didn't see people. He saw numbers to be trimmed and roles to be replaced. He viewed experience as an expense rather than an asset. As I walked the halls of Meridian Freight once more, I saw things differently. I saw the toll the culture of cutthroat efficiency had taken on everyone. I noticed the fear behind Chloe's once bright eyes. The cautious glances of longtime employees who had learned to keep their heads down. The place wasn't broken because of poor finances alone. It was broken because people stopped believing in it. This shift in perspective wasn't just about the company. It was personal. I had to confront my own assumptions. I realized I had placed too much faith in systems and hierarchies, assuming that loyalty and knowledge would protect me. But they didn't, not in a world where the bottom line often trumps everything else. That realization was painful, but necessary. It forced me to redefine what success and value meant, not just for me, but for everyone around me. I began to see that true leadership isn't about titles or flashy buzzwords. It's about empathy, communication, and trust. It's about understanding that people, not just profits, drive a company's success. With this new clarity, I approached my consulting role differently. I wasn't there to just fix spreadsheets or audit accounts. I was there to rebuild relationships and restore faith. I started holding meetings focused not just on numbers but on people's concerns, fears, and ideas. I listened more than I talked. And slowly, trust began to return. I also reconnected with Chloe, not as a replacement or rival, but as a fellow survivor. We talked openly about the pressures she faced, the mistakes made, and the lessons learned. I encouraged her to find her own path, to build confidence from experience rather than relying on shortcuts. It was healing for both of us. This change in perspective also made me question the broader corporate culture. How many other companies were sacrificing experience for cost cutting? How many employees were being discarded without recognition of their true value? I realized this was a systemic issue, not just a one-off incident. Determined to make a difference, I began sharing my story publicly, speaking at industry events and writing articles about the importance of valuing long-term experience. I wanted to challenge the narrative that newer, cheaper talent always trumps seasoned professionals. I wanted to highlight the hidden cost of losing institutional knowledge. Through this process, I found a new mission. My consulting firm wasn't just about fixing financial chaos. It was about helping companies understand that people are their greatest asset. That innovation comes not just from fresh ideas, but from blending experience with new perspectives. That loyalty and integrity build foundations no spreadsheet can replace. The journey wasn't easy. There were days when doubt crept in, when the weight of betrayal felt overwhelming. But with every small victory, every grateful client, every restored relationship, I reaffirmed my belief that change was possible. Looking back, I realized Benjamin's arrival, as painful as it was, forced me to grow in ways I never expected. It stripped away illusions and pushed me to fight not just for a job, but for a vision of a better workplace. One where respect, trust, and collaboration aren't optional, they're essential. And as I continue this path, I carry with me a powerful truth. Experience doesn't just age, it deepens, strengthens, and empowers. It's the anchor in storms of change, the quiet force that keeps companies alive when everything else seems to crumble. This shift in perspective didn't just save a company, it saved me. After the dust settled from Benjamin's downfall and the initial recovery efforts at Meridian Freight, a new door quietly opened for me, one I hadn't expected but was ready to walk through. What started as a consulting role quickly transformed into something bigger, something that rekindled my passion and reshaped my future. It began with a phone call from a longtime client, David, who managed a small but growing manufacturing business. He had weathered the chaos at Meridian Freight firsthand and wanted help navigating the financial uncertainties that followed. His trust in me, built over years, was a lifeline. "Anna, your name carries weight in this industry," he said. "We need someone who understands the full picture, beyond numbers, beyond spreadsheets, someone who knows how to keep a business alive." That conversation sparked an idea. I realized I wasn't just a fixer for Meridian. I was a resource for many companies struggling with similar challenges. Companies where loyalty was undervalued, where experience was overlooked in favor of quick fixes and flashy innovations. There was a gap in the market for trusted advisors who combined deep industry knowledge with genuine care. So, I took a leap. I launched my own consulting firm, focused on financial operations, vendor management, and leadership coaching for mid-size businesses. I named it Steadfast Solutions, a tribute to the steady hand I'd always believed was essential in business. The early days were a mix of excitement and uncertainty. I reached out to former contacts, attended networking events, and slowly built a client base. Word spread that I brought something rare: experience with integrity, empathy, and proven results. The demand was overwhelming. One of my first major projects involved a regional distributor on the brink of collapse due to mismanaged cash flow and fractured vendor relationships. Drawing on what I'd learned at Meridian, I helped them restructure their finances, streamline operations, and rebuild trust with suppliers. Within months, their turnaround was remarkable. What I loved most about this new chapter was the ability to influence not just numbers but culture. I worked closely with leadership teams, helping them foster environments where employees felt valued, heard, and motivated. We emphasized training, mentorship, and long-term thinking, principles I'd seen nearly lost in the chaos I'd survived. Clients appreciated this holistic approach. One CEO told me, "Anna, you don't just fix problems, you inspire people to believe in their work again." That was the highest compliment. At the same time, I never forgot Meridian Freight. I maintained my consulting role there, guiding the team through recovery and helping hire and train a new generation of finance professionals. No more interns tossed into fire, only carefully selected, well-prepared hires who understood the company's values. This balance between old and new felt right. I was no longer trapped in a single role or company. I had freedom, influence, and a platform to advocate for the value of experience and loyalty. Of course, it wasn't always smooth. Running a business meant long hours, tough decisions, and occasional setbacks, but each challenge reminded me why I'd started: to make a difference where it truly counted. The most rewarding moments came when clients shared their successes, stabilized cash flow, renewed vendor trust, empowered teams. Knowing I played a part in their growth was deeply fulfilling. I also found unexpected joy in mentoring others, especially women returning to the workforce after career breaks. Sharing my story, offering guidance, and watching them regain confidence became a personal mission. Looking back, the journey from being replaced and erased to becoming a sought-after consultant was more than a comeback, it was a transformation. Benjamin's arrogance had forced me to rethink everything, but it also opened a path to something greater. Experience doesn't just add years, it builds resilience, insight, and the ability to see what others miss. That's the true advantage I now offer my clients. And as Steadfast Solutions grows, I carry forward a simple message: don't underestimate the power of loyalty, integrity, and hard-earned wisdom. They're not relics of the past, they're the foundation of the future. Because sometimes, the greatest opportunity arises not when the world is perfect, but when it's broken, and you're ready to build it back better. After launching Steadfast Solutions and diving into new consulting projects, I felt a transformation happening inside me, one that went far beyond rebuilding businesses. It was personal growth, a reshaping of my identity after years of feeling discarded and underestimated. I was no longer just the finance coordinator who had been unceremoniously pushed out of Meridian Freight. I was a leader, a mentor, and a strategist, carving out my own path. The first lesson I learned was about resilience. Losing my job after 22 years felt like a death of my professional self. But instead of letting it define me, I chose to let it refine me. Every setback, every closed door became fuel to push me forward. I stopped dwelling on what I lost and started focusing on what I could create. That shift required courage. It meant stepping into unfamiliar territory, embracing uncertainty, and trusting my instincts. I had to overcome self-doubt and silence the voice that whispered, "Are you really ready for this?" But with every small success, an appreciative client, a restored vendor relationship, a team member's grateful smile, that voice grew quieter. I also learned the power of humility. My experience had been my strength, but I realized it wasn't infallible. I had to stay curious, open to new ideas and perspectives, especially from younger professionals like Chloe. I began to see mentorship not just as teaching but as a two-way street. Listening and learning became as important as advising. This humility deepened my empathy, Having been on the receiving end of corporate callousness, I made it a point to treat everyone with respect and kindness. I championed mental health and work-life balance in my consulting, recognizing that people are more than their job titles, their whole lives. Growth also meant embracing leadership differently. It wasn't about control or authority, it was about influence, inspiration, and service. I worked to build trust and transparency in every team I joined, encouraging open communication and shared goals. I wanted people to feel valued and heard, to know their contributions mattered. One particular project crystallized this growth. I was helping a mid-size manufacturer rebuild after a costly leadership shakeup. The team was fractured and fearful, morale at an all-time low. Instead of jumping straight to fixing numbers and processes, I spent weeks listening, holding one-on-one conversations, facilitating group discussions, and uncovering deep-seated concerns. That process was slow and messy but necessary. It rebuilt the foundation of trust and gave people a voice. From there, we implemented operational changes with buy-in from everyone. Watching the team transform, from disengaged and anxious to motivated and cohesive, was one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. At the same time, I never lost sight of my boundaries. Growth didn't mean burning out. I learned to delegate, to ask for help, and to say no when needed. Maintaining balance became a priority, ensuring I could sustain my passion without sacrificing my well-being. This new approach rippled beyond work. I reconnected with family and friends, nurturing relationships that had been neglected. I made time for hobbies and self-care, understanding that personal fulfillment fuels professional success. Perhaps most importantly, I embraced forgiveness, not just toward Benjamin or those who had hurt me, but toward myself. I let go of resentment and regret, choosing instead to focus on the future. That was liberating. Looking back, the journey from being discarded to becoming a confident leader was neither quick nor easy. It was filled with doubts, setbacks, and moments of loneliness, but it was real growth, rooted in resilience, humility, empathy, and balance. Today, when I walk into a room, I don't just see a job or a task, I see people, potential, and possibilities. I carry the lessons of my past as tools to build stronger, healthier organizations and empower others to rise, just as I did, and that is the legacy I am determined to create. When I look back on everything that happened, the betrayal, the loss, the chaos, I realize it wasn't just a story about being replaced or fighting corporate politics. It was a story about resilience, reclaiming identity, and finding strength in the darkest moments. After Benjamin's departure and my return to help Meridian Freight rebuild, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I could have stayed bitter, resentful, and let the past define me. But instead, I chose a different path, the path of forgiveness, growth, and purpose. Walking back into the office where I had spent over 2 decades was surreal. The flickering lights, the familiar hum of conversations, the scent of freshly brewed coffee, it was all the same. Yet different. There was hope in the air, a quiet energy that told me things were healing. People greeted me with surprise and relief, some with gratitude I hadn't expected. It wasn't about power or revenge, it was about restoring balance, rebuilding trust, and proving that experience matters, not just in spreadsheets but in hearts. The months that followed were intense. I worked tirelessly alongside teams, coaching, mentoring, and helping set new standards for accountability and collaboration. I saw people grow, not just professionally but personally. I saw renewed confidence, sparked innovation, and a shared commitment to a better future. One moment that stands out was a company-wide meeting where I shared my story, the struggles, the losses, and the lessons. I wanted everyone to understand that behind every role is a person, and behind every company is a community. I spoke about loyalty, integrity, and the power of perseverance. There were tears, nods, and even applause. It was a turning point, a collective recognition that no matter the challenges, we could rise together. Benjamin's shadow faded as new leadership took root, leaders who valued experience and compassion over buzzwords and shortcuts. Chloe, after taking time to reflect and rebuild her confidence, found her own path outside the company. Our final conversation was one of mutual respect and understanding. Today, Meridian Freight is not just surviving, it's thriving. The systems we rebuilt are stronger, the teams more cohesive, and the culture healthier. But more than that, the company carries a renewed spirit, a belief that people are its greatest asset. For me, this journey transformed more than my career. It transformed my outlook on life. I learned that setbacks are not the end, they're the beginning of a new chapter. I learned to trust myself, embrace change, and lead with heart. Experience doesn't age out, it compounds. It builds wisdom, resilience, and the ability to navigate storms others can't see coming. And loyalty. It's not just about staying, it's about believing in something bigger than yourself. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this: your value is not defined by a job title or a paycheck. It's defined by your integrity, your impact, and the lives you touch. No matter how many times you're underestimated or pushed aside, your voice matters, your story matters, and sometimes, being knocked down is just the universe's way of preparing you to rise higher than ever before. So, if you've ever felt cast aside or overlooked, remember, this isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your comeback. Keep fighting, keep believing, and keep showing the world the power of experience and heart. Because the people who seem invisible are often the ones holding everything together. And sometimes, the best is yet to come. The hardest lessons often come disguised as setbacks. Being undervalued or replaced can feel like a personal failure. But it's rarely about you, it's about the choices and blind spots of others. True strength lies in how you respond, with resilience, integrity, and the willingness to adapt without losing yourself. Experience and loyalty are not liabilities, they're invaluable assets that build the foundation of lasting success. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. If you find yourself in a situation where you feel overlooked or pushed out, take a moment to reflect, not on the loss, but on your strengths. Reconnect with your network, offer your expertise as a consultant or mentor, and seek opportunities where your experience is truly valued. Build a personal brand around integrity and reliability. Remember, sometimes the best way forward is to create your own path rather than waiting for recognition. Surround yourself with people who believe in your worth and never stop learning. Thank you for choosing to listen to this story among thousands of stories out there. Like and subscribe to continue listening to the latest stories.